Okay, good morning, everyone. I think we're going to start and then the other guys can just log in as they get online. Okay, so today we're continuing with Learning Unit 2. We started discussing it last week where we talked about debtors and creditors reconciliation. Now, just to recap, the basis of this is just to make sure that whatever we've got in the control account. Now, remember, a control account for debtors or creditors is where we consolidate all debtors or all creditors information into one general ledger account or T account, like I like to call it. That is where we take the totals from, example, your cash book receipts or your cash book payments, depending on what person you're busy with, and all your debtors journals, your debtors allowance journals, or your creditors journals, creditors allowance journals that you then capture into that account to work out how much your debtors owe you at the end of the month versus how much we owe our creditors. So that is the starting point. Now, what we want to do is we want to take that control account and then compare it to the individual debtors or creditors ledgers. Now, that is basically a listing where we show each and every individual transaction for that debtor or creditor, and we want to make sure that that list is complete and accurate. So how do we do that? We compare the total. If we add each and every individual debtor or creditor, we create a debtors list or creditors list, and we take that total, compare it to our creditors control, debtors control account, and the balances should match exactly. If they don't, it means that we made a mistake, and that is generally what we have to follow up to rectify it. Now, if you do it before you close off month end, you can still go back and you fix it. If you only did it after month end, so you've already closed off your accounting records on your accounting system, then you would show it as a reconciling item similar to what we've done for bank reconciliation, and you would just indicate what the difference relate to, and then you should correct it in the following month. Okay, now just to recap, your learning outcomes specifically for this learning unit, you need to be able to record the financial transactions in a debtor's ledger and creditor's ledger. Now that information pulls through from what we've done in first semester. So that is basically capturing in your individual debtor or creditor's account whether they were issued an invoice, a credit note, have they made a payment, were there any journal transactions that were to be done. So we go in the examples we're going to do today, we're going to look at that as well. Then you have to prepare your debtors control account. Now that's your general ledger account based on your journals for that month that you have to prepare. We're also going to do an example of that today and then show you how the two connects. Then they say make the necessary adjustments or corrections in your accounting records. Now that is generally the information that would come from your additional information in your question, and make the corrections and correct it within your specific section. Now that we will look at in the next session. And then prepare debtors and creditors reconciliation. Now what I said, a debtors and creditors reconciliation is pretty much comparing the two balances. If there's any differences, we would have a reconciling item. Now there's 4 steps when we do a debtors reconciliation. Now the first step is you have to do the individual debtors ledgers. Now that is the specific transactions of each debtor that you do per month. And remember, it's a rolling total, so generally it will show a whole amount. But for your purposes, we only look at a specific month, so you bring forward the balance and then you just document that specific month's transactions. Then step 2, you compile a debtors list. Now, how do I compile that? I take step 1's totals for each individual debtor, and then I create a list in step 2. Then step 3 is your debtors control account that I create. That's my T account. And then step 4 is just to compare the two totals, and if there's any differences, document what caused that specific difference. Okay, now what we're going to do in today's session is we're going to start off with question 2.4. I'm just going to quickly share my Excel file. Okay, so what I want you to do for the next 10 minutes, I just want you to familiarize yourself with the information before we start, and then we'll work through it together so that we can just recap what we've done in first semester. And if you've forgotten about it, it's fine. We'll recap it now, just so that you know how should you complete this question. So the first thing you need to go look at when you do the question for me is, let's quickly page to the last page, you have to go look at what is required from you. Now you'll see these three parts in this question of what they want from you. So the first thing is open, post to, and balance the debtor's control account. So they want you to do the general ledger T account. Now, what you have to do is you draw up the T account, and then remember, because they want you to balance it, you need to show the opening balance, then you show each and every individual transaction and to get to a closing balance. Then number two, they want you to draft the debtors ledger. Now that is all your individual debtors that this company have. Now you'll see they've given you a list of balance of debtors balances, but this was for the previous month. So this would be your starting point of your list of debtors. Now, because of the fact that this is quite a long example, I want you guys just to do the first three for me, and then or I'll show you the first three and then we'll do the last few just together. Okay, and then the last one is draft a debtors list. Now the debtors list you can only draft once you finish step 2, which is the debtors ledger. Okay, so the information they've provided to you, let's quickly look at that. So they've given you a list of debtor balances. Now this is generally the opening balance you will use for each and every debtors ledger. Then they've given you your journal information. Now, this information, the journal information, you will use for both your control accounts as well as your individual debtors ledger. Now, who can tell me what information will you use for the control account? What type of information will you use for your individual debtors ledger? You can just type your answer in the chat function for me. So I'm just going to repeat the question. So my question is, based on the journal information they've provided, what information will I use to complete my debtors control account? What information will I use to complete my individual debtors ledger? Okay, guys, do you have any answers for me? Can you guys hear me?
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
I just wanna understand if I get your question. Do you mean like for the debtors control, what information are we gonna use from the, like in terms of the opening balance, taking it from the list of debtors and stuff like that? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Okay, so you've given one answer already. So for the debtors control, you said we'll take the opening balance from the debtors list. That's correct. Now, if you look at the debtors journal, what information from that journal will you use to caption your debtors control account? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys 10 minutes. Go familiarize yourself with the information first. And then I'll get back to the question and then we'll go through how to complete it. Yes. Morning.
Ma'am, it's me again.
Yes.
Sorry. For the
No, that's fine.
debtors journal, we're gonna use the debtors controls amount, the final amount there, the total, and we're gonna put it on the debit side as sales and VAT.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Okay. And while I've got you on the line, for the individual debtors, what information out of that debtors journal will you use?
I am not quite sure there, but let me
Okay.
just.
Okay. Anyone else want to assist? From the debtors journal, what information will you take to each and every individual debtors account? Okay, so I see you guys can't remember what we did in first semester. That's fine. Okay, so let's go through what information they've provided you. You can pay, it's in your textbooks on page 45 to 47. So I'll just show it here on the screen, but you can just follow in your textbook because the scanned copies aren't always as clear. So let's quickly see what information that they provide you, and then we'll talk about where will you actually use what type of information. Now, the first thing they've given you is your list of balances of your debtors ledger. Now, this is part 3. They're asking for this list. So we need to update this list in part 3. But to do this list, I need to go to each and every individual debtors account. Now, what a debtors account look like is it shows their opening balance and then it shows whether they've purchased any goods from you, whether they made any payments, whether any journals, any RD checks. So it's all the information for that specific data during a month. Okay, now that specific information for each and every individual data, you will find when you go look at each and every journal. You will see each line item here has a data's name. And that is how you know what information goes to which data's account. So when you take a journal, the individual line items goes to individual debtors accounts. So let's take, for example, T. Henry's opening balance was 4,391 Rand. Okay, but now during the month of May, T. Henry has actually made a purchase on invoice number 25 as, okay, no, it was 26. I see there's a Harry and a Henry. Okay, so invoice 26, Henry actually bought goods from you. So that invoice will be reflected on T. Henry's account. Okay, and then the rest of the other line items will go to those respective debtors. And then the total of your debtors control, that amount will always go to your control account, because we said a control account is a summary of all of your debtors information for a specific month. Okay, so that is page 45. Now if we page over to page 46, here you'll see they've given you the debtors allowance information, and similar to the debtors journal, we're going to take each and every individual line item to that debtors account, and then the total of the debtors control column will go to our debtors control T account. And we will do exactly the same for the cash book receipts. Now for the general journal, this is where it gets a bit more interesting. You need to focus here who the journal is for. So in this case, they would tell you debtors control. So that would affect your debtors control T account. And then in brackets, they will indicate which debtor this journal entry relates to. And then you will only capture that entry in that specific debtor's journal, general ledger. Okay, so this one, when you get to the general journal, you need to stay focused, because there is generally two accounts that are affected, but you need to make sure who is the individual that is being affected. And that will be indicated in brackets behind debtors control. Let's quickly see what other information they've given us. Okay, then you remember they've given us the codes. Now, when we discussed this in the first semester, these codes represent a specific type of transaction in your debtors ledger. Now you indicate that code with that type of transaction. So for example, code 1 is credit sales. So every time there's a sale, we'll show 01. If there's any returns or rebates, we'll show 02. Now in a test or an exam, this would probably be left out because of the fact that we do not have a lot of time. But for completion purposes and to make sure you understand the whole process, in the textbook questions, this will be included. Now let's quickly see what was additional information. They say the bank statement at month end revealed the following: that the check received from T. Harry on the 11th was returned by the bank, marked RD on the 31st of May. The transaction was not recorded. So because they haven't recorded it yet, you will have to record this. So this is an adjusting entry. And then T. Berry deposited the outstanding amount owing directly into the bank account on 31st of May. So these two transactions have not been shown in your journals as yet. So you will have to go show them. So remember, RD check would generally go to cash book payments. Let's quickly see the deposit for Seaberry. There's the deposit for Seaberries. So Seaberries would already be included. It's just the RD check that was returned would generally be shown on your cash book payments journal, which is not shown in the information. So the first entry would need to be adjusted for. And then they tell you the business does not expect to award any settlement discounts, nor does it expect to qualify for any settlement discount. So what does that mean? So it means when you do the initial recording, I don't expect to give any discount to my debtors. So if we do give discount, it will be under exceptional circumstances, and we will then record it in the general journal. Okay, now that is the information that was provided. So let's have a look at the debtors control. Just going to blank this out, and then we're going to start from the beginning. Okay, so for the debtors control, we said step 1 is we need to do the opening balance. Now, based on the information they've given you, what was the opening balance of our debtors control account on the 1st of May? You can just type the answer in the chat function, or you can just pick up your mic. So based on the information they've provided us, just going to put it back on the screen. What was the opening balance of our debtors control account? Okay, so Mambali says it was the 20,910, and that's absolutely correct. So the first thing we do, we remember debtors is an asset. Assets have a debit balance, okay, when it's positive, and the opening balance agrees to our debtors listing. Now, what you can also do at the same time is you bring the balance brought forward from that individual list to your debtors accounts. Okay, so I've already created the individual debtors list. So let's quickly go look at where I found the information. So B. Andrews' opening balance was 599, and then T. Henry was 4391. Now what you'll see is on the debtors ledger, I've gone and I brought the balance forward, and I've just included it into my individual debtors accounts. So this is what an individual debtors ledger looks like. You have the name at the top, you've got the debtor number, then you've got the date, the code, document number, folio number, debit or credit, and the balance. Now, how do we actually work out the balance? We take the previous line item, so we would take the opening balance, then we would add any debits to that balance, and we would subtract any credits. So that is any payments, any reversals to get to our new balance. Okay, so that formula there at the top is just to refresh your memory how to get the balance. Okay, now let's move on to the debtors journal. What information in the debtors journal will I use for my T account? And you can give me the amount and just tell me whether it will be a debit or a credit. Okay, so the debtors journal, if I look at the debtors control account, what amount will I use, and will it be a debit or a credit? Okay, so my body says it's the 52,902 Rand, and it will be a debit. That's correct. Now, when you do the control account, how do I actually know which account to put into the description? So what would my description be? So what you have to look at is you look at what is the main account here on the right-hand side. So in this case, our debtors control is made up of output VAT and sales. So when you do the control account, you will then say sales and VAT as your account description. Okay, so let's quickly see. Okay, so we've got our sales and VAT. Is that the correct one? Let me just quickly check here. Okay, that is the 52,000. Okay, so sales and VAT, and then we put that full amount in there. Okay, but the folio number actually is incorrect. This should not be DJ. This should be DJ, the debtors journal. Okay, so that is what your information should be. Okay, let's move on to the next journal. We'll come back to the individual transaction shortly. So let's first do the control account. Okay, so if we look at the debtors allowance, we will now take the debtors control account. It would be the 8,148. Now you can tell me what will the description be? So what will the contra account name be based on that debtor's allowance journal. Okay, so Mbali, that's correct. Sales return and VAT. So we've got a sales return and a VAT account there. So what we will do, just quickly check where I put it in. Okay, there we go. We will have sales return and VAT. Our folio number is DAJ5 and the amount is 8,148 Rand. Now, if we've got the cash book receipts, what column in the cash book receipts will we use when capturing our debtors control account? Okay, so I'm just going to repeat the question. If I complete the debtors control account, which column in our cash book receipts will I use for my debtors control account? Okay, so Mbali thinks it is the bank account. Any other takers? What do you guys think? Donovan, Helder, Onantile, Benice, Mapaledi, Neil, Pamelo, Tebe. What are your thoughts on it? Which column will we use? Do you agree with what Mbali said, or do you have a different opinion? Okay, so Tebe thinks bank. Anyone else? I'm just going to repeat the question for in case you missed it. So the question is, if I take the cash book receipts, I look at that journal, which column will I capture in my debtors control account? Okay, Helder also thinks bank. Okay, so Mabali, Tebe, and Helder, and I'm sure the rest of you, if you look at the bank column, does it include amounts that does not relate to debtors? You can just give me a yes or no answer. So if you look at the bank column, have we captured an amount in there that might relate to something else than just the debtor? Okay, so yes. So based on that answer, because of the fact that we've captured other stuff and it's not only debtors, you would actually use the debtors control column because that relates only to the debtors and does not include any other income we receive. Okay, so I want you guys just to make a note because this is where a lot of students actually go wrong in the test. By just you stress and you're not focusing and you're then just taking the incorrect column. So you all know what the answer is. So the correct answer was supposed to be debtors control. But because you forgot that, remember, a bank account also includes, like in this one, it's including the rent received, the commission received, which does not relate to a specific debtor or a sale that happened. So in that case, you would have actually lost maybe 2 or 3 marks just because you took the incorrect column. Okay, so I want you to make a note so that you don't make this mistake in your assignment or in your test, so that you actually get these marks because these are easy marks. So let's look at the control account. So now we said, okay, from the cash book receipts, we only take the debtors control because that is the debtors year. T. Harry, T. Henry, C. Berry. Now, if you're unsure in the test and you completely blank out, what I want you to do is just go check the details and go look for those debtors' names. And that will assist you to look at which column it would relate to. Okay, so you would then go look for the column that only has those debtors' information in it. And then you would be able to get the correct column. Okay, so let's go back to the control account. So we said, okay, fine, for the bank, they've now paid it. So we take that full balance at the bottom of the cash book receipts of 24,220. Now it's on the credit side because of the fact that they've paid it. So it actually reduces our debtors balance. Now let's go back to the general journals now. So I told you when we look at the general journals, we have to look at each and every individual journal. Now, because of the fact that it goes to debtors control account, when we do the T account, it is easy. We just take the debtors control line item and capture it on exactly the same side as what is indicated in the general journal. Where the little trick comes in is, and the more complexity is when we have to do the debtors ledgers to make sure we take it to the correct debtors ledger account. Okay, so let's look at the first transaction. We had a settlement discount of 10% was omitted. So what happened is B. Andrews got a settlement discount and we reduced the balance by $5.99. So what do we have to do? Because it's a credit in the journal, we will credit the debtors journal control account with that amount. So we capture it at the top. We say it was sales and VAT. It was our general journal 5 and we capture the amount. Okay, so very straightforward. Then the next one, what happened here is we see a correction of payment wrongly credited to debtor T. Henry. So because of the fact that the debtors' names are so similar, they accidentally put it to the wrong account. So now what you have to do is you literally just transferring from the one account to the other account to correct this error to make sure that the balance for that debtor is reflected correctly. Now, because this has two debtor controls, you will actually capture this entry on both the debit as well as the credit side. Okay, so it will actually have a zero effect, but when you do a test or exam, you get marks for this, so you need to show me that you put the in and the out. Okay, so that means, let's quickly see, what do we have to do with it? Where does the amounts go? Let's see if I actually captured it. Okay, no, I actually didn't even put it in here. Okay, so what you do, because it goes to debtors control and debtors control, you would basically have a debtors control on the left, debtors control on the right. Now, your textbook did not show it because of the fact that it's an in and an out, so they just left it off. But you can also show it in here and just say debtors control. Okay, I'll just make it black now. And then you just capture the amount of, it was 1,760. Okay, so we'll have both a debit and a credit for it. So in the test and exam, you will need to show it, but in your textbook, they've omitted it because of the fact that it was an in and an out. So it wouldn't have affected your total at all. Then if we move over to page 47, now we've got a correction of the invoice, again on the 20th. Okay, so that would be similar to what we've done just now. Okay, so I'm not going to do it again. And then the debtors on the 25th, we've got the debtors control. Now that was the VAT that was corrected. Now we're going to debit debtors control with the 324. And we show it in there. Then on the 28th, credit losses were recovered. Now, when a credit loss is recovered, that means we initially wrote off this account as a bad debt, but then subsequently they received money and then they settled their account. So that is why we take it to the debit side, because that is money we've received. The debtors control, we take it back because we've actually received it now. It's no longer a write-off. Okay, and then the last one, they had a creditors control and debtors control. So that is where a balance was, for example, negative on your creditors, and now we're taking it to debtors or vice versa. So we're just taking it out to reflect that it is no longer a debtor or creditor. Okay, now we credited your debtors control with that amount. Okay, so that's how you would complete this. Now the last step you have to do is you have to do the balance. Now what we said, oh, I've missed the transaction here. The RD check, that was an additional information that we had to capture that wasn't reflected. You would also show in here. Then what you do is you add up the total. Now because we know debtors are generally higher, have a bigger debit balance than a credit balance, you would add the debit side, get the total, and then to balance it, you would add the balance carried down, which is then that total less whatever we've got on this credit side. Okay, and then the last step, and this also counts marks in a test, is to bring the balance brought down for the following month, which is exactly the same there. Now let's say you made a mistake here at the top or you missed something, then this mark here would generally be a method mark. So as long as that amount is the same as this one, you would still get the mark, and they would generally give you, depending on how the memo is set out, you might get half a method mark for your totals as well, so that you don't lose all the marks if you've applied the principle correctly, even though you made a mistake. Okay, now before we go on to the individual debtors ledgers, do you have any questions on the control account? Do you have any questions on the control accounts entries? Okay, so Mubali is fine. The rest of you, you can just give me a thumbs up, a smiley face. If you're happy, if you're not, then rather give me a frown face or a sad face. Then, and what I need to re-explain. Okay, so it seems everyone's fine. If you're not, feel free to pop me a message so I can just re-explain something. Okay, so step 2 we have to do, and step 3 is we have to do a debtors ledger and a debtors list. Now, the debtors ledger is this individual account that shows each and every transactions. A debtors list is where we list all the individual debtors, and then the balance at the end of the month is what we add all together to get to the total. Okay, now let's quickly have a look at how we do this. Now if we go back to the question, let's start off with the debtors journal. Normally you will do both of these things simultaneously as you go through the information in a test to save some time. But for today, I just did it a bit more in a structured manner with the different aspects we need to do. So in the debtors journal, we will start with the invoices. So how I like to do it is I take one journal at a time and I go capture each and every transaction, then I can move on to the next journal. This way I make sure I don't miss any transactions as I go through the information. Because if you get stressed, you tend to skip line items. Alternatively, if you want to do one debtor at a time, you are welcome to do that, but then you need to just highlight as you've captured that information to make sure you don't miss any transactions. Okay, so let's start off. So the first entry was invoice 25 that goes to T. Harry on the 2nd, and it was for 4,600. So if I go to my debtors ledgers, I go look for T. Harry. Now, you'll see there's a T. Henry and a T. Harry, so I need to be very careful which one I'm capturing it to. Now, on the 2nd, I will capture the following information. So you capture the code, which is 01. You include the invoice number, okay, which was given in the question, so in your journal. Then you say the folio number is which journal that that information come out of. Okay, so that's the folio number again. The debit amount is the total amount inclusive of that. So let me just go back to the question. So it's this debtors control column that you need to capture. If they give you, for example, only a sales amount, then you will have to add the VAT portion back onto it when you complete this account. Okay, so we do that, and then we update the balance by adding the previous balance plus the invoice to give us the new amount. Then the next one is T. Henry, so it's 9,200. So we go T. Henry, so we've got an invoice for T. Henry on the 8th of 9,200. Then we've got B. Hamill. Okay, now I haven't filled in this one yet, so let's go down to B. Hamill. So what information will I capture here under B. Hamill? So what is the information based on your debtors journal that needs to be captured in there? So if you look at this, what information do we have? What's the main information I will capture in B. Hamill's account? Okay, so if I look at the journal account, this line item tells me the docket number is invoice 27. It was on the 14th and it was for 11,500. So what I would do, just going to copy the information here from the top so I don't have to type all of it over again. Okay, so we said it's on the 14th of May. It's invoice number 27. The code will be 01. It's still debtors journal 5, and the amount was 11,550 is what I add onto B. Hamill's account. Then we've got C. Benny, which was invoice 28, and C. Berry, invoice 29. So let's see if we've captured that. C. Benny and C. Berry. Okay, so that's how you capture. Okay, it's not that one. Quickly see, did I miss something? C. Berry, 26. Okay, so on the 26th was the invoice. Okay, now with these transactions, we generally have to capture them in date order. So if you capture this invoice, for example, you just need to make sure that there wasn't any other transactions between the opening balance for Seabury and when the invoice date was. Okay, so now we've captured all the debtors journals invoices. Now you would continue with that process. You would do exactly the same with your debtors allowance, your cash book receipts. Okay, and then when we get to the general journal, you would actually capture the individual journal to that individual account. So let's quickly look at what it would look like for the first three debtors, just to explain the concept before we take a break. Okay, so with B. Andrews, he didn't have any transactions except the general journal, which was the correction of the discount. So in that case, we would just capture that general journal, we would credit it, and the balance would be zero. Now what would happen is that balance zero would tie to the debtors list at the end of the month and should be a zero. Then we had T. Henry. Now here you can see he had an invoice which came from your debtors journal. He had a credit note which came from your debtors allowance journal. And then you had your journal vouchers which came from your general journal. And then we had the cash book receipts that we captured. And where we had sales or corrections of error, it was debited, and where we had a credit note or a payment, it was credited, and we updated the balance. Now that balance, the 12,755, is then also shown on the debtors listing. Okay, and then you would add all the debtors accounts and get to the balance. And you would do exactly the same for each and every other debtor. Okay. So you get to their final balances. So we're going to stop here for now. We're going to take a quick recess and then we'll just wrap this up. I just want to have a look at one or two more things because before we finish this question then, and then we'll continue to the next question. Okay, so before we go on a break, do you have any questions on what we've done so far? Okay, so do you guys have any questions so far? If you don't have any other questions, let's take a 10-minute recess. We'll start again at 9.